The Avs are staying red hot through the remainder of the season, and they've just made a major step in the right direction to make another run at a Stanley Cup championship, and they did so in historic fashion. The Avs are absolutely buzzing right now, and with a few games left in the regular season, things are looking very bright for the Stanley Cup run that this deep and dialed-in roster is about to make in the 2025 Stanley Cup Playoffs. We're going to dive into all the latest in the Colorado Avalanche and Colorado Avalanche news right here today on Avalanche Digest. But before we do so, I want to remind you to make sure that you are subscribed to Avalanche Digest right here on YouTube. If you're unsure, if you don't know if you're subscribed, exit out of this video right now. Go check on that subscribe button, and if you are not subscribed, click on that subscribe button right now and make sure that you're all dialed in for all the latest news and updates that you can need on the Colorado Avalanche right here on Avalanche Digest. I'm going to say it one more time. Right now, go check and make sure that you're subscribed. This is your number one stop shop for Colorado Avalanche news. We want to make sure that you are subscribed and dialed in to get all the latest on your Colorado Avalanche. Let's dive into this Colorado Avalanche team that is absolutely buzzing right now. The Avs are 7-2-1 in the last 10 games they've played. They're on a 2-game win streak, a few struggles in a few games against the buzzing 12-game win streak St. Louis Blues, as well as the Calgary Flames, who are one of the teams fighting for that second wild card spot in the West, hoping to clinch a playoff berth. But either way, they're back on a winning streak, 2 wins, and they had an extremely dominant win over the Columbus Blue Jackets the other night, a 7-3 win over Columbus. Now, that 7 goals is a huge number. Obviously, with most NHL teams, you kind of expect that in a 7-3 game like that, you may have some guys that scored 2 goals. You might have even had someone that had a hat trick, but not your Colorado Avalanche team. We've talked about how deep this roster is and how well this team is doing on the score sheet and how much these lines from all the way from the top line all the way down to that very last line are able to contribute. Well, listen to this. That 7-3 score from the game against the Blue Jackets the other night, 7 different goal scorers in that game for the Avs. It was Charlie Coyle, Parker Kelly, Nathan MacKinnon, Brock Nelson, Miles Wood, Cale Makar, and Devon Taves all scored a goal for 7 total goals in that game. And that just proves and shows how deep this roster is and how absolutely buzzing this Colorado Avalanche team is. Now, I do want to make very important note that the Avs went into this Columbus game with a little bit of history on the line here. The last time a defenseman scored 30 goals in a season was in 2008-9 when Mike Green for the Washington Capitals was able to do so in 2008-9. Cale Makar comes into this goal against the Columbus Blue Jackets, and he tucks his 30th goal of the season in between the pipes, making for history once again for the former Conn Smythe and Norris Trophy winner Cale Makar, who has just been an absolutely legendary player for this Colorado Avalanche team. We take a look at his stats so far this season. In 77 games, he has 30 goals, 60 assists, 90 points as a defenseman. Just absurd numbers coming from Cale Makar. He leads the league in points for defensemen, as well as goals by a defenseman. Just all over the score sheet, he is dominating everywhere and anywhere that he's playing right now for this Colorado Avalanche team. And really cool to see him get the dirty 30, as the Spit and Chicklets podcast says. As I said, he became the first defenseman to score 30 goals in a season since Mike Green in 2008-09. So in that game against the Columbus Blue Jackets, the depth of this roster and the continuation of this team absolutely buzzing shows over and over again. You have those top guys like Nathan MacKinnon, Cale Makar, and even on that second line, Brock Nelson and Marty Necas getting some points in that game as well. You're obviously seeing them continue to buzz. But then you have some of those lower line guys, Charlie Coyle, Parker Kelly. Coyle got his first tuck as a Colorado Avalanche in that Jackets game the other night, as well as Parker Kelly, who continues to thrive on those lower lines and fit in perfectly with the cohesion and the depth of this Colorado Avalanche team. Now, the win over Columbus not only had a lot of history for Cale Makar, but it was a win that clinched a ticket to the playoffs for the Colorado Avalanche. They currently sit at 3rd in the Western Conference, and the win over Columbus guarantees them a spot in the 2025 Stanley Cup Playoffs, in which we already know it is going to be a ridiculous ridiculously tight race in the playoffs this season. A lot of teams are absolutely buzzing right now, and I've heard a lot of people in the media and a lot of critics say that this is the most open that the Stanley Cup has ever been. Obviously, there's been years in the past where there's a clear kind of 2 or 3 teams where it's almost certain that you're going to see those teams go to the Cup. But I mean, this year you have so much of a broad scope and a broad spectrum of who's going to go to the Stanley Cup final. As if I were to make a guess, I honestly have no idea who's going to go all the way. Obviously, we hope that Colorado can make a deep run and find themselves in the Stanley Cup final, but so many teams are doing so well right now. There was an insane trade deadline this season, and I think it just goes to show that the playoffs are going to be electric this season. We take a look at if the playoffs started yesterday. This bracket was made yesterday, April 3rd. Today's April 4th. If the Stanley Cup playoffs started today, the Jets, the Stars, and the Avs have all clinched on the Western Conference side. Right now, the Avs in the number 3 spot in the Central Division, the Stars in the number 2 spot, and the Jets in the number 1 spot. So if everything were to stay the same in that regard, the Avs and the Stars would face off in the first round, and the Jets would play the, right now in the wild card 1 spot, St. Louis Blues. The Blues are ridiculously buzzing right now. They cannot be stopped on a 12-game winning streak. And this is exactly what happened in 2019 when the Blues changed some things up in the middle of the season. And then in the playoffs, they made it all the way to the Cup, and they upset the Boston Bruins and won the Stanley Cup in 2019. The Blues hire head coach Jim Montgomery that the Boston Bruins fired at some point in the regular season this season. And things are just all of a sudden starting to look beautiful for that Blues team who currently holds the wild card 1. Kings and the Oilers, very typical first-round matchup. It feels like we see it almost every season. And then the Knights and the Wild are matched up as well on the western side. The only implications here for Colorado are that Dallas is 4 points away with 2 games in hand to the Winnipeg Jets. So right now, the Stars would play the Avs in the first round, and the Jets would play the Blues. As I said, the Stars have the potential to catch the Jets, which would put the Stars then against the Blues, and the Avs would play the Jets. So there's this little bit of a jumble, a little bit of kind of a mess around going on, especially now that the Avs have clinched the playoffs. And if we go back and we look at the bracket for the Stanley Cup playoffs, if it were to potentially start today, the theory that I have and the thought that I have is that those 2 teams on the bottom left of the bracket right there, the Colorado Avalanche and the Dallas Stars, I think that one of those 2 teams is going to the Stanley Cup final from the Western Conference. And if those 2 teams are playing in the first round, whichever team gets out of that series in 7 games max, I think that's the team that is going to the playoffs. I think that every other matchup for the first round potential, obviously, that is on the Western Conference side, the most locked in and the most predictable matchup right now is Avs versus Stars. But I think that if the Avs and the Stars were to play in the first round of the playoffs, I think that whatever team gets out of that first round matchup can get through anything on the Western Conference side. And I'm very excited to see what either of those teams can do. Obviously, if the Stars are somehow able to pull ahead of the Jets, because the Avs would have a lot of work ahead of them if they wanted to catch the Stars, which that doesn't change the matchup. All that does is give them home ice. So if the Avs somehow catch the Stars, the Avs would have home ice, but they'd still play the Stars. If the Stars catch the Jets, the Jets and the Avs would play, and the Stars would get to play the wild card 1. Right now, it's the St. Louis Blues. But in that case, if the Avs were able to get out of the matchup versus the Jets, which I think would be extremely likely, they would then most likely play Dallas in the second round. Either way, the point that I'm getting at here is the Avs and the Stars, no matter when they face in the playoffs, whether it's the first round, the second round, or somehow miraculously, if the bracket gets jumbled up enough that it's in the Western Conference final, whichever one of those teams makes it past one another, they are going to the Stanley Cup final. That is my 100% accurate, and I feel very strongly about prediction. So we'll see what the Avs are able to do now that they've clinched a spot in the 2025 Stanley Cup Playoffs, and as the Central Division and the playoffs in general continue to stay extremely tight with just a few games left in the regular season, we're getting more and more excited and closer to the 2025 Stanley Cup Playoffs.